14 years ago now, I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence, Frank, because most people think it's only one thing. I realized I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. When those two factors converge, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way.
Hi, this is Frank Schaeffer, and you are watching and or listening to the podcast of which I am host, In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. And today, I am very thrilled to have Cindy Gallup, who is a lot of different things. So I'm going to try not to tangle them up as I read the notes here. Being terminally dyslexic, is a brand and business innovator. She is founder of the social sex tech platform MakeLoveNotPorn and is a highly sought after personal brand, life, and executive coach. Did I screw that up, Cindy?
No, that all sounds terrific. Thank you.
Sounds like it relates in some way to you, right?
Absolutely.
Good. Well, listen, it's a real pleasure having you on. You're someone who I've kind of run across in the news from time to time. You know, you pop up because you say and do things that gives you, 15 minutes plus of fame here now and again, right? And so I'm interested in a lot of what you've been doing, but let me start on the personal note. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of dual nationality, Chinese, UK, US connection. And the reason I ask you this is because having been born to missionary parents in Switzerland as an American expat who then went to British boarding schools, from a mother whose father was a China Inland Mission missionary, and then before the turn of the century, fled the Boxer Rebellion and then just got out ahead of the communist takeover. There's sort of some weird things here. And then, of course, you deal with very substantive moral human issues as well. So I think that I'd really like to hear more about you in terms of what maybe we share in terms of this kind of odd background of international, cross-cultural. Can you talk about your parents a little bit? Tell us all about that.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right, Frank, because, whenever anybody says to me, so where are you from? I go, there isn't a short answer to that question. Yeah. And so I explained that my father was English, my mother is Chinese, Malaysian Chinese. I was born in the UK, but when I was 6, my parents moved to Brunei in Borneo, where my father had a job. And so I grew up in Brunei, which I always have to explain is actually a lot more boring than it sounds. And then I went back to the UK for boarding school and to university. I read English literature at Oxford. I then worked in London. I worked in theatre, then in advertising in the UK and in London for a number of years. Moved to Singapore in 1996 to help start up and run the Asia Pacific office of the ad agency I used to work for, BBH. And the reason I'm here in New York is because I moved here 23 years ago to open up BBH's American office for them. So I like to think of myself as a global citizen, and I bring a global perspective to everything because that's how I grew up and that's how I've operated in the business world.
Tell me about your parents. Who's alive, who's not alive? Both of my parents are dead. I'm just asking who you've got for family.
Sure. So my father died 3 years ago. My mother is still with us. She lives in London. She's 89. And I have 3 younger sisters, all of whom are UK based.
Do you get back to either Malaysia or China?
I used to travel to Asia a lot, both for business and for speaking engagements. My parents actually retired from Brunei to Penang in Malaysia, where my mother had family, and they lived there for 20 years. And so I would go and spend the holidays regularly in Penang. Then they moved to London because my father's health was failing at that point, and we wanted them nearer us. And so this really began when my father was not well and in a nursing home. But I actually go back to London once every 4 to 6 weeks for a few days, initially to spend time with my father, these days to spend time with my mother, because obviously when someone's 89, you don't know how much more time you have with them.
Yeah.
The pandemic clearly really blocked that. I didn't see my mother and my sisters for 1.5 years. But now that I'm fully vaccinated and things have opened up, I've resumed that schedule. And so I try and get over to London, as I say, once every 1 to 2 months.
Yeah, the first boarding school I was in Linfield, Sussex, near a little town called Haywards Heath on.
Oh, yes, I know Haywards Heath. Yep.
Yeah, the line from Victoria Station to Brighton. But I'm wondering, where were you in boarding school?
I was at Wadhurst College for Young Ladies, which in fact was very close to Tunbridge Wells in Kent, which you may be familiar with as well.
Yeah, no, I know where that is. And the boarding school I was at was one wonderful experience. The first one, actually, the prep school for little children, kind of unbelievably, as I look back on it, the youngest children there, they came in at 5. I arrived when I was 10. And then, of course, it was a prep school. So I left when I was 13, 14, went on to what the British call public school, which, as you know, is a private school for high school. Were you in both prep schools, this school for girls? Was it also a girls' school going on through the high school years, public school?
It was actually, it was, so I and my sisters actually went to school in Brunei, and then my father sent me and my next sister down, Annabelle, back to the UK. I went for A-levels, which is the last 2 years of high school effectively, and she for O-levels, so she for the last 4 years.
And how would you look back on your boarding school experience? Good, bad, indifferent? What do you remember?
So you'll find this entertaining because the way my parents chose our boarding school was they wanted somewhere where a lot of the other girls would also have parents who lived abroad, because they felt that we'd feel more at home there. So at Wadhurst, there were a lot of girls whose parents lived abroad. It turned out because they were missionaries. And so Wadhurst was a very Christian and very rigorous school. You were only allowed to wear jeans on Saturday night at dinner. The rest of the time, there were clothing rules, and we weren't allowed to watch certain British comedians on TV because they made jokes about the Pope, and so there was all of that. But I have to tell you, Frank, to be perfectly honest, I grew up in Asia. I grew up reading Enid Blyton books about, Mallory Towers and St. Clair's. And I thought boarding school was wonderful because I'd always wanted to go, And so, after spending, much of my childhood and formative years in Brunei, I can tell you, boarding school was absolute heaven by comparison. Yeah. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you mentioned earlier you had started reading this new book of mine, and I hope that you get far enough in to read my chapter on feminism. And when you do, you will find that one of my great formative experiences was the headmaster's wife, Eunice Park, who was a tremendous person and really reached out to me as a kind of semi-literate homeschooled evangelical child from this mission. We too had missionary kids there, not because it was a particularly Christian school. I mean, it was a Christian school, but in that general sense of low church Anglican, as you'll know what that means. But it was tremendous. In other words, once I got over the basic homesickness after the first term, the next 3.5, 4 years were gold. And then the public school I went to was dreadful, and I ran away when I was 15 and never went back.
Oh, which school was that, out of interest?
The school that I loved was Great Wallstead in Haywards Heath, Sussex, actually Linfield, which is a village near Haywards Heath. The one I left was St. David's College, which is on the north of Wales, in Llandudno, North Wales. So I took off from that in the middle of the night, made it all the way to London, sitting in the loo on the train, hiding because I didn't have a ticket. And you'll be quite proud of me. I got all the way back to Europe without a passport by pretending I was part of a Dutch family taking the ferry from Folkestone to Hook of Holland.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a, from one boarding school person to another. I got there. So
yeah, no, and I was curious about the school because this is a funny little fact. But so my father, like your experience, I mean, he was sent away to boarding school when he was 7.
yeah,
And he actually was very happy at both his prep school, which was a place called Temple Grove, and then his high school, which was Sherborne. He was at Sherborne with David Cornwell, who was John le Carré, the author, the novelist.
sure.
And my father loved Sherborne. John le Carré hated it with a vengeance, to the extent that his hatred manifested in a lot of his books, because a number of his books feature an English boys' public school in scarifying detail. And I bring this up because I've just read his last novel published posthumously, which again has a bit about a horrible English boys' boarding school.
Yeah.
And clearly he hated it so much that hatred never left him, and he used his literary powers of expression to manifest it throughout his writing career, which was just quite funny.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that share that. C.S. Lewis had a terrible time. I don't know what Tolkien did. When you dip into any of the Malcolm Muggeridge, all those guys, there was a whole generation that came through. And of course, Winston Churchill, hated his education. But not, I found, of course, for me, it was my first taste of normalcy because I was living in a fundamentalist commune in the 50s and 60s in Switzerland. And it was wonderful in some ways. It was a very safe space to grow up in some ways. But looking back on it, had I not been sent to boarding school, my first taste of something different than the indoctrination that I was going through would have occurred much, much later, and maybe too late. So I look back on getting, drafted into doing things like HMS Pinafore and all this other stuff.
Oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I was one of the sisters and the cousins and the aunts.
Well, there you go. So, you and I actually have a very similar path. Now, I have a question for you about the Chinese Malay connection. Am I correct in saying Chinese Malay? Did I put that right?
Actually, a Malaysian Chinese.
Okay, Malaysian Chinese.
Because my mother's ancestors, were from China, from a little village in Fujian province. Yeah. They emigrated a couple of generations back. Actually, emigrated first to Thailand and then from Thailand down into Malaysia. And so my mother speaks a number of different Chinese dialects. She also speaks Thai as well as Malay.
So when you were growing up, did you get any sense of the fact that the Chinese community in Malaysia, was kind of entrepreneurial and at some odds with the Malay community, or did none of that intrude into your life at all? Or, because the thing is, what I'm reaching for here is, let me just put it in my terms. I was an American kid growing up in a small Swiss village, and the Swiss are already, blinkered. You're never going to be part of that community. Then we were kind of a small cultic religious offshoot on the edge of the village. So that's another remove. And I had this great consciousness of always being the other. I didn't put it in those terms, but just like you're saying, well, where are you from? It's a hard question to answer. And I'm wondering if part of being in your family with British, Chinese, Malaysian, all this mixed together, gave you a feeling of kind of being an outsider, because it seems to me that a lot of your observations that I've read are kind of like a de Tocqueville, in the sense that you're here in the States, but you're not from here, but you look in and make commentary on things. That sort of outsider perspective, I think, brings a lot of clarity sometimes. Maybe I'm just making stuff up, but I feel that about you. I feel you as an observer, see yourself as someone observing something, but a little bit from the outside.
No, I think that's absolutely true, Frank. First of all, I grew up in Brunei and not Malaysia, which is a separate country. And by the way, you're absolutely right about the fact that there is a tension in Malaysia between the Chinese and the Malay community, unfortunately fostered by a very nationalistic government. In Brunei, that wasn't the case, actually. Chinese, Malay, Indians coexist, quite happily. But the thing, though, is that my parents got married at a time when mixed marriages were not at all common.
Yeah.
That they married in 1959 in Singapore, in Penang, actually. They met in Singapore. And, there was initially resistance to the marriage on both sides. My mother's parents did not want her dating an Englishman. My father's mother, my English grandmother, was wonderful and utterly welcoming. But within the English family, one relative famously said, well, I think peaks should stick to peaks and pugs should stick to pugs.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in Asia where, I was neither one thing nor the other. To the Chinese, I wasn't Chinese. To the English, I wasn't English. And I, absolutely encountered racism, in my childhood as I was growing up. And so I think that that certainly drives a sense of being other, in the way that you describe.
Yeah, no, I just find it so interesting because, I recently had a dermatology appointment, which you can see just the remains of here. She took something off, and it was a wonderful Dr. Tan, a wonderful elderly Chinese woman who, the appointments aren't supposed to take this. Well, her American nurse, who was probably, mid-20s, stood there agape. We got into a conversation about British boarding schools because she had been sent to one, again, this international sort of mix when she was 7. And she didn't see her parents for 8 years.
Oh, my God.
And I was thinking of you because she also is Chinese via Malaysia. And she's probably a good bit older than either you or I, but it's interesting. There's an international community floating around out there in the world that brings a different perspective to things. And it's kind of hard to explain to people who are from sort of one place and one culture. So I always, and she and I got into we talked for an hour, and I think eventually we remembered that she was supposed to make sure I didn't have skin cancer, but that was after we had because she had not met too many people in the course of work who really understood when she said, well, I was in a boarding school for 8 years and I didn't see my parents for 8 years. I kind of got that. But I think that what I'm getting at is that there's a community out there of people who don't, quite fit in where they're from. On the other hand, who bring a certain perspective. Okay, so let me change subject here a little bit. Did you ever see that 1989 movie, How to Get Ahead in Advertising, with Richard E. Grant?
Of course.
Yeah, and because that movie and With Nor With I are sort of like little Bibles to me. I go back to them once in a while. Well, I need cheering up. I like Richard E. He's easy to watch, but I'm wondering, fast forward to your meteoric career in advertising, how do you see yourself vis-a-vis a film like that, which clearly is a satire, but on the other hand is almost a precursor to what you might call the woke sensibility about capitalism, industry, money making, and I guess advertising today? I don't know if that's too roundabout, or if nobody's seen How to Get in Advertising, they won't know what I'm talking about, but you do, so that's all.
Well, to be frank, I saw it, literally when it came out. So, yes. So my recollection of it is it's very hazy these days. But what I will say is, back when Mad Men was running over right here, the depressing things I used to say was, how much had changed and how much had not changed. And, I've spent a lot of time, especially since I left the corporate world, trying to get my industry to reinvent itself in ways that it is spectacularly still failing to do. And so, in my speaking, consulting, etc., originally, very much want to help drive change from within the system, and I've given up. And now I say, especially to women and people of color, it's time to redesign the system. And in fact, I've been encouraging everybody who is other in my industry to start their own industry. And what I mean by that is start your own business, start your own agency. But I deliberately articulate it like that because I explain that, when you start your own business, your own agency, you can make it work exactly the way you want it to. You can design it to function the way you would like the industry to function. And so you are starting your own industry because you're starting the industry that we would all like to live and work in.
I find that really interesting because, of course, as soon as you say advertising and marketing, the specter of kind of the career-oriented life, but also the bottom line for shareholders and everything raises its head. And the projects that I've been working on for the last couple of years look really at trying to rebalance life between, shareholder and corporate interests and what actually makes us happy, which tends to be the quality of interpersonal human relationships, which of course, you and I've sort of gotten into a little bit with you telling me that you're going back to visit your mom, and that stage of life she's at and caregiving, at this stage of life. Obviously, you and I are on the same page on that, but I'm wondering how you see the balance between the 1970s feminism, which, oddly at that time, of course, I'm still in the fundamentalist firmament. So, that period of feminism, we're on the other side. We're the counterweight. We're the religious right. We're the people telling, we've got to put this back in the box and we've got to take choice away from women and all these other things. And obviously that's where I come from, and I changed my point of view and have been very much on the other side for a very long time now. But looking back at that, I wonder, Jose Zylstra, who introduced you to me, who's a friend of mine and runs Gender Fair, we have talked about this, and we both feel, and a lot of women I've talked to feel this way. My daughter, who's a CEO in New York City, where you live, feels this way. And that is that simply wanting to buy into something that was invented by men for men, it has to go further than that. And that is just what you were talking about, reinventing the process entirely. In other words, taking into account, women as whole people and men as whole people, whether gay, straight, non-binary, pair bonded or not. We're so far away from that now, the way things are structured, where we can't even talk rationally about parental leave. You have women going back to work having delivered a baby after 3 days because they're working 2 jobs, and no one thinks this is inhuman. It's socialism if you have a social safety net to help them. Let me just have some thoughts on that issue of feminism, career, how you balance things in your own life in terms of priorities. I'm just really curious about that.
Sure. Well, in terms of my personal life, and then I'll come on to the feminism point. But I'm extremely fortunate, Frank, because I am a woman who has never ever wanted to be married. I have never wanted children. Very glad I always knew that, as opposed to finding out the hard way by having them.
Right.
I adore being single. I cannot wait to die alone, and I date younger men casually and recreationally for sex. And I'm deliberately very public about all of that, because we don't have enough role models in our society for women and for men that demonstrate you can live your life very differently to the way that you're expected to and still be amazingly happy. And I'm one of the happiest people I know. So, I'm fortunate in that I don't have to worry about work-life balance, because I get to decide how I operate my work and my life without, the additional dynamics of a partner, a family, etc. I very much want to encourage other people to look at all of this differently in the way that you describe. So I am a rampant feminist. Whenever anybody asks me if I'm a feminist, that's my answer, because that's how much of a feminist I am.
Right.
And I make the point, that you were making, which is, I say to men, we live in a world where the default setting is always male. Men, you have no idea how much happier you would be living and working in a world that was equally designed and led and managed and influenced by all of us together.
Well, I go a step further than that in my chapter on feminism, and I say that I think feminism is an actual biological evolutionary step, that it's not a social media movement. It's certainly nothing to do with politics, that it's like losing our tail or coming out of the trees or walking out of Africa together and becoming hunter-gatherers. And I think the human race actually depends on it, because I think it is the next step. So I think part of it is a choice, part of it is social, part of it is about politics, but it's much bigger than that. And it seems to me that unless we listen to the feminine, and I'm not talking about touchy-feely here, I mean the real
No, I know.
We are going to die off as a species. This is the only link to the future. And if you look at the way, for instance, COVID played out, and is playing out, and the difference between the good female leadership that was given from top government positions compared to these bumptious fools like Bolsonaro, Trump, and et cetera. It's night and day. Coming from the evangelical background I came from, as I put it in my book, I was basically trained to be an asshole by divine right. In other words, I was told that the male should dominate females. I should discipline my children. My wife should obey me. The place God had given her that was the only way she would have meaning was to be my helpmeet. And I was the head of the home. And it took a long time to disengage from this because, yeah, as you well know, you're a psychologist in some ways because of everything you do in life coaching. I mean, the last thing you want to do, we all have traits that we wish we didn't have. And if you're bred in a religion that is essentially feeding your worst instinct at every turn and saying, no, you may be feeling guilty about screaming at your wife. You may be feeling guilty about hitting your children, but actually this is what God wants you to do. So as a matter of faith, say goodbye, subdue your conscience and step out claiming the word of God, whatever it may be. So, it took a long time to get past that, but having seen that and the difference that Jeannie made in my life, but also just an awakening conscience, it goes way past what's fair for me now, and it's much more into the realm of survival, because all the studies, as I talk about in the chapter on feminism, are clearly showing even things as mundane as actuarial tables about longevity in cultures that are more egalitarian, as opposed to the United States, for instance, in its attitude towards women, which is abysmal still. Men live longer. So it isn't a theory. What you're saying is not a theory, Cindy. It's actually, this has been studied. So if men want to live longer, you're going to do better in an egalitarian society. And by the way, in my own family, I have somebody a bit, in your direction, in the sense that my 50-year-old son, Francis, is single by choice, childless by choice. He happens to be a teacher. And as I point out in my book, the have children part of the title, I'm very careful to point out, and not as a throwaway line to mollify a couple people who have chosen not to have kids. I'm talking about from the heart and played out as a theme through the whole book, is that when I say have children, I am talking about caregiving as a way of life. Right now, your mother's your child. And in fact, I'm your child because you're on my podcast and this is caregiving. You're caregiving Frank Schaeffer this afternoon because you're talking to me and you're making something of me. You're making me exist a little more relative to my life and my calling because you're talking to me. So when I talk about having children in my book, of course I mean biological children, but I also mean the adoptive children that we all have around us.
Yeah. I mean, Frank, I've got 3 nieces, 3 nephews, 4 goddaughters, and a godson, and I adore them all. I'm involved in their lives, So I totally take your point.
Yeah, but even more than that, even the people you help through the sort of minefield of modern access to pornography from childhood on. I remember reading you talking about something, I forget whether it was your TED Talk or an interview, whatever, it doesn't matter, but talking about, we've essentially put together a system that's going to create the worst lovers the world's ever seen, something to that effect. Talk about that a little bit, because see, I think that's caregiving. You're giving care to a generation of people who are essentially being lied to. Talk about that.
No, absolutely. So just for those of our viewers and listeners who are not aware of what I do, I have a business called MakeLoveNotPorn. We are pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. And actually, to be frank, starting Make Love Not Porn was a complete and total accident. Everything in my life and career has happened by accident. I've never consciously, intentionally planned anything. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I date younger men. They tend to be men in their 20s. And 14 years ago now, I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering what happens when 2 things converge. And I stress the dual convergence, Frank, because most people think it's only one thing. I realized I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. When those two factors converge, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from.
Yeah.
I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 14 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I want to do something about this. So 13 years ago, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at MakeLoveNotPorn.com that in its original iteration was just words. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I had the opportunity to launch it at TED in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to say the words "come on my face" on the TED stage, 6 times in succession. The talk went viral as a result, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from every country in the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I then felt I had a personal responsibility. I had to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that would make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. But I also saw an opportunity to do what something you alluded to earlier, Frank, which is, you know, I believe the future of business is doing good and making money simultaneously. I saw the opportunity for a big business solution to this huge untapped need. And I use the word big advisedly because even then, 13 years ago at concept stage, I knew if I wanted to counter the global impact of porn as default sex ed, I would have to come up with something that at least had the potential one day to be just as mass, just as mainstream, and just as all pervasive in our society as porn currently is. So thinking very big right from the get-go. And so basically I turned Make Love Not Porn into the world's first and only user-generated, human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So basically, given that, you know, what I wanted to do was encourage more people to talk openly and honestly about sex, very simply, I just took every dynamic in social media and applied them to this one area no other social network or platform will allow in order to socialize sex and to make real world sex and talking about it socially acceptable and therefore ultimately just as socially shareable as anything else we share on, you know, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram. And so, you know, what MakeLoveNotPorn.tv is a platform that celebrates real world sex. Anybody from anywhere in the world can submit to us videos of themselves having real world sex, but we are very clear what we mean by this. We are not porn. We are not amateur. We are building a whole new category on the internet that has never existed before, social sex. And so our competition isn't porn, it's Facebook and YouTube, or rather it would be if they allowed you to socially, sexually self-express, which they don't. And so social sex videos on Make Love Not Porn are not about performing for the camera. They're simply about doing what we all already do on every other platform in every other area of life, which is capture what goes on in the real world as it happens spontaneously in all its funny, messy, fabulous, comical, awkward, hilarious humanness. We curate to make sure of this. There is no self-publishing of anything on Make Love Not Porn. Our curators watch every single video submitted from beginning to end before we approve and publish it. We're the safest place on the internet accordingly. And we have a revenue sharing business model, which I designed to democratize access to income. Our members pay to subscribe, rent, and stream social sex videos. Half the income goes to our contributors, whom we call our Make Love Not Porn stars.
So, and what was the year that you kind of did the TED Talk and everybody got interested?
Yep, that was 2009.
Okay, so there's a good place to break for a minute and say that this is a podcast in conversation with Frank Schaeffer. Today, my guest is Cindy Gallup, who has just been talking about everything that she's been doing, but I'm going to recap anyway. She is a brand and business innovator. She is founder of the social sex tech platform MakeLoveNotPorn, and is a highly sought after personal brand and life and executive coach. So thank you. And I'm sitting here talking about a whole range of subjects. I just want to remind you that if you like this podcast, to please like it in the interweb sense of like it and pass it on. And then we'll get back to a conversation. Now, earlier in our show here, we were talking a little bit about these various ideas that come out of the project that I've been working on. The book covers behind me: fall in love, have children, stay put, save the planet, be happy. Now, if you look at the cover of the book, you know, you could give it a completely traditional twist and say, well, he's talking about a monogamous marriage relationship. It's going to be exclusive to that, and so on and so on, which of course it's not. What I'm interested in is the idea of sexuality you're speaking about. One of the things I say in the book is that the only model we really have for people who have put the idea of living ahead of work and made a political campaign of it so far as the gay community in the coming out in the 70s and 80s, who basically said, we're going to fight for the right to love, and that will be a political stand we take. And of course, what my book is talking about is that we need to expand that, which is something I think you're involved with, in the sense that you're saying you're single by choice, you're happy, you don't have children, you're going to be staying that way, this is a good life. But there's also a political angle to this, because there's no way to escape the fact that in a country that elected Donald Trump, where 83% of white evangelicals supported him, who 60-some% of them believe the election was stolen, and he's still president. How do you fit in with contemporary America when, you know, we've got a Supreme Court with Amy Coney Barrett and so forth and so on, now taking away the right to choose, well on the way to trying to create an American theocracy? If you follow the logic of what they're doing, basically America becomes an evangelical version of Iran in some form, or Saudi Arabia. The world out there, correct me if I'm wrong when it comes to China, but last time I checked, in terms of pornography in China, to make or disseminate pornography puts you gives you a death sentence. It isn't just prison. If you were in Saudi Arabia, you'd already be dead. The US has people on the Supreme Court that are more in tune with the Saudis than they are with anything American constitutionalism would have envisioned. Let's flip the page here and get off your career, my career, our points of view. Talk to me as someone who observes this culture from a very intense point of view, because sexuality is always a minefield. You've got to get a lot of flack back, or you have to have had some thoughts about where you're positioned in where modern America is post-Trump. There's a lot in that. You've packed a lot into that question, Frank, and so I'm going to make a number of different responses to it. First of all, just for your and the audience's information, Make Love Not Porn is a global platform. We have traffic and members from 220 countries. And so everything we're talking about is a global issue. What I'm tackling with Make Love Not Porn is a global issue, not just an American issue. Secondly, I am doing something very profound with Make Love Not Porn that I don't get enough credit for. And I don't get enough credit for it because people get stuck at, oh my God, people having sex on video, you know. And also I should just explain to the audience, if they're wondering why they've never heard of Make Love Not Porn, I fight a battle every single day to keep this business going, essentially for two reasons. A, every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup gets to take for granted, I can't. The small print always says no adult content. And this is all pervasive across every single area of the business that makes operating this business enormously challenging. Secondly, I am massively inhibited from growing it because I am banned from advertising anywhere. I can't advertise on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, by the way, I ask you. I also can't advertise in traditional media. You know, the MTA won't let me advertise on the New York subway, billboards here, etc.
I'm actually just about to set out to raise a round of serious funding for Make Love Not Porn that I hope will overcome all those barriers and enable us to scale to be the Facebook of social sex, because that's my ambition. Sure. And here's why it's so important we do that. So when I say to people that Make Love Not Porn's mission is this very simple thing, to make it easier for everybody in the world to talk about sex, because we don't do that currently, people don't get how massively, profoundly societally transformative that would be. And here's what I mean, and everything I'm saying applies as much to America today as to anywhere else.
Sure.
So I designed Make Love Not Porn around my own philosophies and beliefs, one of which is that everything in life starts with you and your values. So I regularly ask people this question: what are your sexual values? And nobody can ever answer me, because we're not taught to think like that. Our parents bring us up to have good manners, a work ethic, sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed. But they should, because in bed, values like empathy, sensitivity, generosity, kindness, honesty, respect are as important as those values are in every other area of our lives where we're actively taught to exercise them. So this is my vision for an America and a world in which Make Love Not Porn achieves our social mission at scale. Parents will bring their children up openly to have good sexual values and good sexual behavior, in the same way that parents currently bring kids up to have good values and behavior in every other area of life. We will therefore cease to bring up rapists, because the only way that you end rape culture, and by the way, Frank, this really is the only way, is by inculcating in society and openly talked about, promoted, operated, and very importantly, aspired to, gold standard of what constitutes good sexual values and good sexual behavior. When we do that, we also end Me Too. We end sexual harassment, abuse, violence, all areas where the perpetrators currently rely on the fact that we do not talk about sex to ensure victims will never speak up, never go to authorities, never to anybody. When we end that, we massively empower women and girls worldwide. When we do that, we create a far happier world for everybody, including men, to the point we were talking about earlier. And when we do that, we are one step closer to world peace. I talk about Make Love Not Porn as my attempt to bring about world peace, and I'm not joking. And wrapped up in what I do, Frank, in the profundity of what I do, are many, many dynamics that in themselves drive gender equality, diversity, inclusion, that drive tolerance and compassion. You know, I have proof of concept in the years that Make Love Not Porn's been operating, that we have the power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that nothing else does. And along with that comes changing all sorts of things for the better, including how men perceive women, how men treat women, how women feel they have agency in themselves to make sure that they are treated the way that they would like to be. So, everything I'm doing is how I am tackling all the issues you raised in my own way, and in a very unique way that other people don't want to touch, because it is so challenging, but it's so important.
How do you envision, either in the future or in the present day, how are you doing this, if you're broaching this, translating what you're talking about and what you're doing to a point where it would become, it would be in a form, I guess I could put it this way, where you would be able to go directly to parents and educators and provide them with material that would help teach those manners through what you're doing, but at the same time with a sensitivity towards what is appropriate for a 7-year-old, for an 8-year-old, for a 10-year-old. I think one of the tragedies of the availability of porn right now is not a moral one, and it's not even that they create, bad lovers with bad manners. It's that because parents aren't going to talk about sexuality with children in an honest way, the Google search gets there first, and all of a sudden, you have a 10-year-old boy watching rape videos that have been put on by somebody or other somewhere that have nothing to do even with porn, but are just brutality, and so on. How do we cut past what you might call the prudery on one side that wants to, quote unquote, protect children from sexuality rather than talk to them about it honestly, but at the same time give real information so that we understand what these good manners are, but without going to a place where parents and educators aren't going to go along? How do you get to kids with your message?
Yep. So I'm so glad you asked that question. First of all, Frank, just for your and my audience's benefit, people should know that, MakeLoveNotPorn.tv is obviously for 18 and over.
Sure.
We have many parents who write to us telling us they have bought their 18 and over 20-something children's subscriptions to Make Love Not Porn because they want them to see what happy, healthy, loving sexual relationships look like.
Right.
And incidentally, those parents also tell us that being members of our community at Make Love Not Porn has made them feel able to be more open with their children about sex. Mm-hmm. However, to answer your question directly, I mentioned that I'm about to raise a round of serious funding for Make Love Not Porn, part of which is designed to build what I've had in the pipeline for years, because parents and teachers began asking for this from day one, which is an expansion of Make Love Not Porn into the 0 to 18 version, which delivers sex education. And so I am going to build what I call the Khan Academy of sex education, because Khan Academy, the global online tutoring platform, tutors on every other topic under the sun except this one. Educational technology, edtech, is exploding as a sector, sure, not when it comes to sex education. So we're going to build MakeLoveNotPorn.academy. And in fact, if our listeners go there, they will see I have a holding page there at the moment. And we're going to build it on the same principles as MakeLoveNotPorn.tv, user-generated, crowdsourced, human-curated revenue share, because I'm not about reinventing the wheel. This is an aggregation play. So we will invite sex educators from all around the world, America, but every country, to submit to MakeLoveNotPorn.academy their own coursework materials, videos, books, comic strips, posts, whatever it is. Now, we will curate, because we only ever publish what is Make Love Not Porn endorsed. So, if an American sex educator were to submit abstinence-only sex education, we're not publishing that. Right. We don't endorse the so-called educational approach that goes, don't do it. Doesn't work. So we will then publish segmented by age appropriateness. So if you're a parent freaking out going, oh my God, my 6-year-old just asked about this, what do I say? Here's where you would go for entirely age-appropriate tools and content to have that conversation with a 6-year-old. If you're a teacher with a class of 14-year-olds, here is the section where you will find age-appropriate teaching materials. Yeah. If you're an adult, access all areas, because adults are as desperate for this information as children are. We will, some of this will be free to access. We'll also charge to download, subscribe, bulk buy for a school. And by the way, I'm talking a huge revenue generator. People are desperate for this. Yes. And we will then split the income 50-50 with its creators, the same way we do with our Make Love Not Porn stars. Because I have to tell you, Frank, right now, nobody goes into sex education to make money. Right. I have friends who are brilliant sex educators. They face all the same challenges I do. They can't even make a living doing this. They have to take other jobs to support themselves. Sure. I want to change that, because this is enormously valuable work.
Yeah, and it's obviously something that's not being done, which is really interesting, because the license that came along with modern porn after it went viral online has not been followed by any kind of a healthy updating of anything to do with actual sex education. And so you have a total closed door on one side, and then a door that's open on the other side, but has nothing to do with sex education. And if anything, what do you think the impact, forget the social context and the terminology here, but how do you, aside from producing really bad lovers, what has the impact been of the access to porn at very early ages, particularly for a male audience, as you understand it? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, and I'm certainly not assuming you're going to say this or that or the other. This is a genuine question.
Sure. So first of all, Frank, just to emphasize what I've been saying for 13 years, the issue isn't porn. The issue is that we don't talk about sex in the real world.
Right, I agree.
Because if we did, people would then be able to bring a real world mindset when they view what is performative produced entertainment.
Well, I should rephrase the question and say, what has the impact been of having the only quote unquote sex education some 8-year-old is getting off his iPhone be, whatever rough edge of the porn industry he runs into? That's the way to put it.
No, absolutely. And so bear in mind that I am my own research lab.
Right.
I'm very open about the fact that I date younger men casually and recreationally. I date a lot of them. I see for myself exactly how this plays out in the real world all the time. And when I say that, I'm doing something very profound with Make Love Not Porn, Frank, I designed Make Love Not Porn to be utterly gender equal, all inclusive, male, female, trans, non-binary, whatever. But probably more men write to us than women, because we are especially a revelation for men, because we are somewhere where they can be open and vulnerable and sensitive around sex and love. And I want to just read one email to you that we got from a young man, because I think that will demonstrate to you what I mean when I say that we have a profound impact in a world where porn is default sex ed.
Sure.
So we got this email, and actually one of the things I love about this email, Frank, is that I designed to Make Love Not Porn to be a mass market mainstream venture. And the reason I say that is because, in the sex tech world, there are many founders creating, high-end premium products and sex toy platforms, whatever. And I always go, my target audience is the horny 16-year-old boy in Minnesota. Because if we don't get him, he's going straight to Pornhub and staying there. So what I love is that this is an email from a blue-collar worker, as you'll hear. And so this email was headed, "This has helped." And the man writes, "So usually when people give feedback, they say, I don't normally do this. This is actually true for me to write an actual email. I apologize if I may be long. I found out about your website via a story on playboy.com. I'm 35 years old and a very single straight male working at a factory in a very small town we take out these details for our blog, but it's the American Midwest. As I've gotten older, the one thing I felt that I've been missing is some type of connection when viewing porn. My habits have always been go to Pornhub, search a video, boom, done. That changed when I was watching one of the videos on here. I don't think I've ever seen something that I was so taken aback by. It was intimate. It was two people you saw an actual connection with. It made me question my own viewing habits right now, which is a good thing I feel in terms of growth. I also feel the need to speak about the need for males like myself to talk about how they feel. I feel like for the first time I want to confront my own issues with sex and my own sexual health, which in all honesty is not good at all. Dating has been non-existent for years, mainly due to me being so busy for most of my life with working 3 jobs to survive that I never really got a chance like I do now to try to understand why. All of this came about with your website. I'm very grateful to kind of start a new journey here, to try to understand myself more. I want to thank you guys for this. I felt this has kind of been a nice wake-up call. Thanks again." Wow.
That's great. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so there's your audience.
I mean, imagine that impact at scale, at the same scale as Facebook, Frank.
Now, as you were saying, though, you want to get to him when he's 16, not when he's 35.
No, exactly. Which is what, again, Make Love Not Porn Academy, as well as when I can raise funding, first of all, the advertising barriers fall when I can write them a big enough check. So that'll solve that problem. It'll enable me to build Academy so that we can take the message out to younger, people and parents and teachers and that whole audience. And really kind of, seek to just honestly change the world through sex. That's what I'm out to do.
So when you're talking to me, in terms of life, not lifestyle, but in terms of daily living and sexuality, I got Jeannie pregnant when we were 17 and 18, and we've been together ever since, with huge ups and downs and a long educational process for me. And I wouldn't change that any more than I would try to change the fact that you haven't done that. Now, in the scope of what you're doing, obviously, there's going to be as many people like me as there are like you out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now how does that balance? Because obviously if Jeannie and I submit a sex tape to you or whatever it will be two people who have experimented and been together for a long time, and these are best friends having sex together. It's a different vibe, but it's one that I'm sure you validate.
But no, and Frank, we have many Make Love Not Porn stars in your situation.
I understand that. So what I'm asking is how in your own personal life, because you've made your choices and you have that, and you're happy and so forth and so on. Nothing is ever perfect in life, as we all know. But on the other hand, you found your way. But when you're dealing with sexuality, capital S for everybody, obviously there's a lot of people like me out there, or people who aspire to that for very good reason, whatever. How do you sort of encompass that? You know, your old white guy who's 70 and enjoying being 70 and being 70 with his 70-year-old wife, all the way down to the 16-year-old in Kansas City you want to reach. How do you put us all on the same page and not alienate me?
Yep. Because all we're doing at Make Love Not Porn, Frank, is we are holding up the mirror to how the world has sex. Okay. Right. You know, I like to say, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the real world documentary. Right. And so our Make Love Not Porn stars range in age from 18 to 80 in terms of our contributors. Our members do as well. We have a ton of Make Love Not Porn stars who are, you know, people who've been married for 20 years. Still a wonderful sex life. It's great for people to see that. At the same time, we have members writing to us saying, "Oh my God, you saved our marriage. We haven't had sex in years." You know, because we're social sex, it's fine for the husband to say to the wife, you know, one partner to say to the other, you know, "Hey, I came across this thing called Make Love Not Porn. Let's check it out." Then they write and go, "Kaboom!" You know, I mean, one woman wrote to us earlier this year saying, you know, she said, "This is the best $10 a month I've ever spent." She went, you know, "We've been married for 20 years. You know, our sex life really dwindled. Since we discovered Make Love Not Porn, we've had sex 8 times in the last month." You know, so no, we are for everybody, and everybody can see themselves reflected. And also, by the way, you know, Frank, Make Love Not Porn is a social experiment. I'm putting this platform out there. You know, we don't dictate what real world sex is. You, the world, you, our community, show us. And I can tell you that real world sex is more wonderful, more hot, more rousing, more surprising, and more innovative than porn will ever be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And the interesting thing for me is, I was joking the other day. I did a rooftop event in New York down on Wall Street with a friend of mine who was helping me launch my book. And I was joking with the audience, saying something in relationship to, you know, the relationship of being married for a while and with one person. And I said, you know, the funny thing is, if somebody was doing a video, this was maybe foreshadowing our talk here of Jeannie and I having sex. I said, you know, when you go to a movie, you know, sex is always this first coupling, and somebody gets slammed against a wall because they're kissing so passionately. You wonder why they don't break the other people's teeth. And then he's got to hoist her up on a large household appliance and do it on the kitchen stove. And I said, you know, if you were making a videotape of Jeannie and I having sex, it would be, what are they doing? There's 2 naked people lying there holding hands talking. When are they going to get on with it? And then, okay, then they do. And then, you know, they talk a little more, then they have a wonderful sexual relationship and do all sorts of wonderful things to each other, wind up holding hands again, talking some more. And you could just picture the crowd saying you know, they wouldn't even read it as sex because it's so far away from this idea.
And Frank, that is what people love. Yeah. That is what people appreciate about our video, because those are what our videos on Make Love Not Porn are like. Yeah. You know, and people just love being able to see that real world sex is all of these different forms. And by the way, what we do too, Frank, is, you know, we celebrate real world emotion, love, intimacy, feelings. The reason that's crucial is because all around us in popular culture, you know, TV, movies, Netflix, we are surrounded by creative expressions and narratives of relationships, but we never see the actual sex. Right. On Make Love Not Porn, you see the actual sex, but you also see the relationships. Yeah. Because in our videos, the 2 things are indivisible. Yeah. And when I say that, by the way, I don't just mean that in our partnered videos, you see healthy, loving relationship dynamics. In our many solo videos, because we have many masturbation videos, you see what it's like to have a healthy relationship with yourself.
Sure.
With your own body, your own genitals, your own sexuality. And, love radiates through the screen. I picked up a Twitter exchange between two men a couple months back. One man had posted on Twitter, help me out here, folks. I have this really weird kink. I'm looking for porn that is all about how, somebody loves somebody else for, how great they are, how kind they are, how wonderful they are. Okay, I know it's kinky, recommend. And another man responded to him and he said, there's this website called MakeLoveNotPorn where you can see real couples making love. In one video I watched, the woman said to her man, I love you, while they were making love. He said, I cried when I saw that. Okay, that's how moving, that's how wonderful, that's how real world loving our videos are. So we would really welcome you and Jeannie submitting your own real world sex video to Make Love Not Porn.
Well, the way, as Jeeves would tell Bertie Wooster, the contingency is remote.
Fair enough. By the way, I'm a huge
but I'll go so far as to say that if I did submit a video, you would get comments like, they've been lying there talking about their grandchildren for 10 minutes. When are they going to start doing?
No, our community doesn't comment like that because our community facetious. Appreciates.
I understand that. One last question and then we'll sign off. And I'm interested because your choices sexually in terms of young men, this sort of freedom you found in this life and so forth and so on. How do you feel personally, philosophically, in terms of, okay, let me back up here. For the last 10 minutes, you've been talking about intimacy and the love that people find in these videos you're posting. All right. And masturbation and so on, self-love and all this. And that could be, with some changes, that's, I hate labels, but in a way, that's in the nicest sense of the word, that's an old-fashioned in the sense of relationship, meaning-oriented view of sexuality. Am I wrong?
Yes, because honestly, Frank,
yes, I'm wrong, or
yes, you're wrong. Yes,
okay,
you're wrong.
Yeah, good. Well, correct me.
Yeah, but because I can tell you that everybody wants to love and be loved.
Right.
Okay. Especially, by the way, the pandemic has been very good for Make Love Not Porn because, boy oh boy, has the pandemic ever proven that what we all thought for years is not the case. For years we've gone, the future's digital, AR this, VR that. Boy oh boy, on the other side of this, we are all desperate for IRL human touch, connection, love, intimacy, feelings, emotion. There is nothing old-fashioned about any of that. Ignore the media, ignore everybody jumping on trends just to kind of be clickbaity. I can tell you that young people today, older people today, everybody today, we all want to love and be loved, and that's eternal since the dawn of time, and that will never, ever go away. And by the way, that is what we celebrate at Make Love Not Porn. I feel very lucky, by the way, in the world we live in today, I have a business that is about nothing but love. Yeah. We celebrate nothing but love. We showcase nothing but love. You will find at MakeLoveNotPorn.tv nothing but love. And that's a wonderful thing to work on.
Well, that's a very good place to end, and we should talk more sometime because I want to track this next step you're doing and book you and talk some more. So let me finish by just saying you have been listening to and or watching In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and Cindy Gallup has been my guest, and she is known for many, many things, including this site of hers, which, by the way, we will put links to. So anybody who's watching or listening to this. And please, and Cindy, please share this conversation on your sites as well. But
I most certainly will.
Ernie, my wonderful producer, will put this up, and then we will put links to anything you want to be linked to, so we don't leave one of your many ventures out. Make Love Not Porn is something that you all want to look into and take a look and see what Cindy's up to. I think that this has been a great conversation, Cindy, and I want to remind people that if they like this podcast, to please like it in the interweb sense. My book, Fall in Love, Have Children, Stay Put, Save the Planet, Be Happy is out. Surprisingly, a lot of my book would be very much in line with everything Cindy talking about today. We're on the same track. Love is a real thing, by the way. It's science-based. This is not a Hallmark card. It's right there in your brain. It's the only reason we don't all kill each other, because we are fundamentally caregivers of one another. So this is Frank Schaeffer, and Cindy, this has been a tremendous pleasure. A shout out to our mutual friend, Jose Zylstra, for introducing us.
No, right back at you, Frank. This has been terrific. Thanks so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thanks a lot. Talk again soon, I hope.
Absolutely.